Hi, welcome to Virginia Time Travel, your portal of the Commonwealth's past, present, and future. Northern Virginia is fast becoming a technical powerhouse and may soon rival Silicon Valley. But science and technology have always been two-edged swords. Some look at technology as sublime, others as monstrous. The classic book Frankenstein, first published in 1818, reflects the hopes and fears of every scientific era. Some historical reenactors are doing some interesting interpretations around the themes of Frankenstein, and they call it the science of Frankenstein. Have a look.
I still do not understand how someone can say science and reason can trump that of faith. We believe in the fact that we are here. We believe in the Almighty. We believe in the divine. Yet you say that there is something else. Professor Lind, I appreciate your knowledge, but can you honestly say that the divinity of all that we hold dear is explainable?
We live in times that are marked by reason. This is the Enlightenment. We find ourselves dispelling the mists of superstition and being championed by the likes of Voltaire, the likes of Lavoisier, the likes of other men who put science at the forefront because it is the truest way for enlightenment, I believe.
Like this galvanism can only be a passing phase?
Now, there are some who think that galvanism, the latest phase in electricity, is something that is new and frightening. But believe it or not, it is based on the principles of electricity that are not new at all. In fact, it was the Greeks who first gave us an early understanding of electricity. It was their term for this material, which was known as amber, petrifactious tree sap. And as Mary is wearing her amulet around her neck.
Most fashionably, I might add.
Indeed. If it were to rub against your clothing, it would have the ability to have a statical electrical attraction, much like a magnetic lodestone. And the Greek word for amber was electron. So it is not so new as it seems. Now, Pliny the Elder and the physician Galen actually had reports that there were animals that had this electrical capability. They reported something known as the torpedo fish that one caught by fishermen in the Mediterranean. This fish, when touched, would give a torporific jolt, and they found this rather curious and had no idea from whence this power emanated, but they would bring this fish to the shore for curiosity seekers, and the elderly people in town would actually stand upon it with their feet, receiving a jolt to their legs, which presumably cured them of gout or rheumatism. So the notion that electricity is somehow alien to living species is wholly inadequate. It goes back further than this. In India, there were an electrical catfish that reportedly was used by doctors and applied to the brows of those suffering from epileptic seizures to cure them.
Professor, not to be indiscreet, but I believe these sorts of electrical fish were also used as a type of torture tool.
Yes, but presumably by the Marquis de Sade had a rather depraved approach to them, but
quite so.
But perhaps we should get back on more, how should we say, discrete topics.
Well, I shall write it down for my research, nonetheless.
Nonetheless, well, to continue, in ancient Abyssinia, numb fish, as they were known, a sort of electrical fish that lived in the rivers there, were used to apply to the heads of those suffering from demonic possessions. And then that brings us to the Gymnotus electricus, which we have a specimen here, the electrical eel from Amazonia. This was reported when the conquistadors were traveling in South America, that there was some sort of creature that lived in ponds and shallow streams, that if a horse were to step in those waters, it would be electrified to the point of great dismay. And now it is the stuff of scientific conjecture, so that men of science all over the world are seeking specimens of these. There's a gentleman, I believe his name's from Bancroft, from New Jersey, that is moved down to Dutch Guiana, where these are native species, and he has arranged from the local tribesmen whereby they throw a strange, curious sort of root extract that numbs the skin into the ponds, numbs the electrical eels. He catches them, puts them in a large tank, and prepares them for export to the Americas and to England. However, they are rather unruly beasts and seem to not like their captivity, and they rather die en route. But he's making great attempts to try to only harvest the most vivacious eels, and he tests this by throwing his servant boy into the pool where the eels are contained, and if the young boy screams loud enough, he knows that he has good export material. So
How loud does a scream have to be loud enough?
a man of rather dubious ethics, I must say. But nonetheless, the advent of the eel did open a new, how shall I say, chapter in the study of electricity, in that it was no longer, it became the focus. Once upon a time, you'll remember that Benjamin Franklin was busy saving us from electricity from the skies because electricity was seen as an anathema to life. But now, with the electrical eel, the notion was that perhaps electricity is life, that there are aspects of living species that are conveyed by electricity themselves. So this is now the focus of a great amount of study throughout the world. Cavendish in England is studying electrical eels, for one. So we now find ourselves wondering if electricity is innately physiological and has curative powers.
This reminds me of a man, a Dr. James Graham, if I may consult my notes. Yes, quite. A Dr. James Graham of London. And in his Temple of Health, he arranged accommodation whereby wealthy gentlemen and women can engage in a number of restorative pursuits, like their scintillating evening in his electrical celestial bed, where he claimed that any issuance of progeny would result in future generations of the most virile and vigorous Englishmen. This particular claim and its veracity are, I trust, beyond the scope of this interview.
One could assume as much as they wish, but if they want to have some kind of form of stimulation, why not just simply bleed yourself? It's cheaper, it's quicker, and, well, there's a knife always available somewhere.
Well, perhaps less painful and more entertaining by far. For when you enter Mr. Graham's bath, you encounter two such large lions which
Apparently
have electrical currents running through.
Coated with metal so that sparks shoot out of their eyes, and they're like grand theatrics by all accounts, but nonetheless rank quackery. Now, there
were ladies such as myself dressed in less clothes than I am now, which may have been part of the entertainment.
That always does strike up business, does it not? But
scandalous.
There were, if one were to walk into Dr. Graham's salon or any fashionable salon at the time where electricity was being used, one would see all manners of entertaining dalliances. Young boys strung from the ceilings and sparks being drawn by the nose to ignite glasses of cognac. Or there was the Venus electrificata, where a young lady would stand upon a wax stool and she would be electrified by an electrical generating machine, and her hair would start to stand up and sparks would emanate. It's quite fascinating. As a matter of fact, I do believe Erasmus Darwin wrote on this, and I have an excerpt from one of his poems about this happening according to his view. And it said, "From the warm cushion and the whirling glass, beard the bright cylinder with golden wire, and circumfuse the gravitating fire. There from each point cerulean lustres gleam, and shoot in the air the scintillating stream. Or if on wax some fearless beauty stand, and touch the sparkling rod with graceful hand, through her fine limbs the mimic lightning darts, and flames innocuous swirl round her heart. Over her fair brow the kindling lustres glare, blue rays diverging from the bristling hair, while some fond youth the kiss ethereal sips, and soft fires issue from their meeting lips." It was rather common at the time to have a young lady stand there and be challenged by suitors who would come and try to partake of a kiss while she was electrified, whereby they would be struck down unconscious on the floor to regales of laughter. And this is the reason why we hold Dr. Graham in rather dubious suspicion.
I believe my husband, Percy, would love that poem you just read.
Well, Percy would love that poem. I believe it would, rather on the racy side.
I believe his friend Lord Byron might appreciate it more.
Indeed.
Although I am sure they are both already familiar with the poem, I may not need to introduce him to
I'm
it.
sure they are familiar with a great many things that we shall not raise in this interview.
Indeed.
I am aware of that.
Indeed. But I hear you say these things about creatures. You brought this eel here, and I see this particular creature, and I can't help but remember my own experiences of a Frenchman who presented a fish covered in fur that he claimed came from Canada. And yet, he made it. How do I not know that this is simply you saying it can produce this electricity?
Do you mean to tell me, sir, that he pieced a fish together his own, by his own hand?
He did his own work in creating this creature to prove that any story could be true so long as the gullible can see it.
And that is where the blinding light of science intervenes, because there are quacks as long as there are people who are willing to be potted of their money. So as long as we have this ignorance, there will be science there to dispel them. And these tests have been done to further the issue, to prove that this is the case. Galvanism comes from the term, the name of the man, Luigi Galvani, who was an anatomist in Italy who was studying frogs. And we have a frog in a jar here. And he realized that as he was dissecting a frog, as an anatomist is wont to do, at certain times his scalpel would touch the nerve ganglion. Now, mind you, this is a frog that has been removed from its head. It's just its legs. And the frog's legs would twitch, nonetheless. Now, he had thought that he had discovered some sort of animal electricity, as he termed it, hidden within inside living creatures, because these sparks were similar to the ones that if one would feel if one were to touch a Leyden jar and feel a spark, that same sort of twitch is what was manifested in the laboratory. Now, he was incorrect in his assumption, and it was another scientist named Alessandro Volta who realized that it was the metal tray he was working in and a differing type of metal in his scalpel were actually causing an electrical chemical reaction, dissimilar to the spinning globes that Dr. Franklin would use and the friction to make electricity. He had created an entirely new kind of electricity that was eventually the source for the galvanist studies.
Yes, but you say its legs twitch. I mean, he claims he's dissecting. Are you sure he wasn't eating it and just simply cutting into the frog and it just started jumping around?
Well, you do have quite the imagination.
But it's just a simple question of simple
He wasn't.
logic.
I believe frogs' legs are not an Italian dish; they are a French dish. So
Yes, but he
perhaps
can
this will
travel.
this will dispel your suspicions.
Yes.
But nonetheless, a gentleman, the nephew of Galvani, a man named Giovanni Aldini, actually took it upon himself to prove Galvani's theory of animal electricity. And he conducted experiments whereby he would take freshly butchered animals, set them in a laboratory, apply electric sparks to their nerves, and their eyes would blink, or the tongue would protrude, or the hooves would twitch on the bodies. Now, obviously, these sort of rather macabre and rather frightening experiments had a natural trajectory. Eventually, there would be questions. Could these experiments actually work on man?
Have you heard, per my colleague's point, that the satirists are having a field day with these things in the papers? May I read you the latest?
Indeed.
This is a witty rejoinder by a certain Dr. Caustic, entitled The Electrician. For he, 'tis told in public papers, can make dead people act out, capers. and shuffling off death's iron trammels, to kick and hop like dancing camels. To raise dead dog he was able, though laid in quarters on the table, and led him barking round the town with 2 legs up and 2 legs down. And this most comical magician will soon in public exhibition perform a feat he's often boasted, and animate a dead pig roasted. With powers and metallic tractors, he can revive dead malefactors, and is reanimating daily rogues hanged at the prison bailey.
Actually, Mr. Aldini arranged with local magistrates soon thereafter to actually procure the corpses of freshly dispatched criminals, whereby he could conduct these tests in public, whereby their arms, their heads were reanimated by electrical means, and this was the stuff of the galvanism.
Bringing a man back from the dead, that seems as if you're trying to play God.
Well, it does. It does recall the legend of Lazarus, does it not?
Yes, but with Lazarus you had Christ raise him from the dead. Hey, there's a difference between a man who says he can take this electricity and bring back the, I mean, who would you bring back, sir?
Isn't it remarkable? 'Tis much like the fellow you mentioned creating his own animal. And I confess, as the professor speaks, I often think of a poem I heard as a child, the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Have you heard of it your own self? The poet, Coleridge, visited my father's house when I was but 7 or 8, and I heard him speak it. It thrilled me to my core. He spoke of the souls of dead sailors flown down from their bodies, and then the mariner sees those very sailors rise again as a ghastly crew, and here they show them in the papers too. I have been transfixed by the accounts.
Well, and it's the notion that perhaps the Grim Reaper can be denied his mortal debt is something that is now of the essence. It is truly believed by these gentlemen that not only can the dead tissue be forced to twitch and the like, but perhaps a man could be brought back to life.
May I read you some more? The doctor, having procured the lifeless body of the condemned, and preparing it through exsanguination and surgical exposure of certain nerves, was thus prepared for galvanic stimulation, transmitting the electrical fluid to the ulnar nerve and elbow of the corpse's arm. The fingers moved most nimbly, like those of a violin player. These convulsive agitations appeared to, at times, make the reanimated hand point and beckon the audience.
I read on another instance that was similarly reported in the paper that Aldini took the severed head of a criminal, attached a wire to its ear and another part of the nerve in its neck, and the face contorted in such a way so that it could mimic the nuanced facial expressions of the greatest actors of the British stage, such as David Garrick, to the point where some people actually fled in horror afterwards, men and women alike. So one could imagine the horror of these things, and it would think that a lady such as Mary would be somewhat affrighted by these things, but apparently not.
Ghastly, isn't it?
It is ghastly. Why would anyone want to see a head come back to life? I mean, you're basically already trying to play God. Are you trying to play the devil as well?
Because it is perfectly interesting. See here. Turning to one of the decapitated criminals having been conveyed to the laboratory for these experiments, the head alone was subjected to the galvanic action. And listen to these medical terms and see if you are not mentally engaged. Having moistened the inside of the ears with salt water, there was formed an arc with 2 metallic wires, which proceeding from the two ears were applied, one to the side and the other to the bottom of the device. When this communication was established, there were strong contractions in the muscles of the face, which were contorted in so irregular a manner that they exhibited the appearance of the most horrid grimaces of rage, horror, despair, anguish, and ghastly smiles in the murderer's face. Are you not interested, sir?
I'd be more frightened than interested, madam.
Well, as you can see that Madame Shelley is one of rather strong constitution, I must say, and not easily affrighted. In fact, you've been inspired by these words more than anything else, have you not?
In fact, I have. Perhaps it is my mother's own bravery that has strengthened my soul.
She indeed, the great Mary Wollstonecraft, the liberal and rather strong thinker, a paragon of the age of reason, has inspired you well.
Strong thinking in a woman. Dangerous terms, depending on who you speak with.
Well, it certainly wasn't my father who helped my constitution.
Well, nonetheless, the issue would be that Mary seems to be following in her mother's footsteps, and she has taken it upon herself to craft her own words that are based on these galvanic discoveries.
Yes, yes, I'm sorry, Mrs. Shelley, but I could not help but notice you've been taking notes this entire time. I've been curious as to why.
Oh, well, sir, as the
Do you
professor
care to
has
share?
mentioned, I have endeavored to create my own novel. I am consistently around the presence of writers and do have myself my own imagination, and as a matter of course am crafting. Would you like to hear some of my writings?
Oh, I am intrigued.
As my notes today are unfinished, you will not mind hearing
Of course.
this part.
I'm assuming then it must be a most excellent sonnet of love and such.
No, actually, might I give the backstory, Mary?
Of course you may,
That
sir.
there was Mary was traveling with her husband Percy and Lord Byron and a doctor named Polidori near Lake Geneva, where it came upon a particularly dreary night where they took it upon themselves to challenge each other to a ghost writing tale. And Mary decided that she would try her pen to this. And do you have some excerpts that you could share with us?
Oh, of course I do, although I must correct you. I would not refer to Polidori as a fellow writer.
Well,
Miserable chap.
well, nonetheless, he'd write something about vampires, I believe.
Yes, the vampire. A dark and stormy night indeed. Ah.
Can I assist you in any way?
Oh, no, I'm simply juggling my notes and my finished manuscript. In any case, I wish to edit as I continue to read. An enterprising young lady must always. Please do not critique as I read, sir. Let it flow over you. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out and then on the working of some powerful engine show signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. Then every muscle of the body was immediately agitated with convulsive movement, resembling a most violent shuddering. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the Creator of the world. His success would terrify the artist. Horror-stricken, he would rush away and take refuge from his odious handiwork. He would hope that, left to itself, the slight spark of life which he had communicated would fade, that this thing which had received such imperfect animation would subside back into dead matter, and he might sleep in the belief that the silence of the grave would quench forever the transient existence of the hideous corpse which he had looked upon as the cradle of life.
That's rather good, is it not?
Rather intriguing. What do you plan to call this particular tale?
I have not as yet found for myself a title. I am still in the course of the pursuit of science, which is why I have engaged the professor.
Do you have a suggestion, sir?
Oh, I don't know. Never good at titles, but what would be a good one?
The setting is Germany, by the way.
Germany. Oh, well, it should be a German name then. I don't know. How about Frankenstein?
Oh, that is quite a good name. I shall have to put it at the
Indeed.
top of my head.
Bravo, sir. Well, if you cannot rest your head tonight without clearing your mind of the hideous phantasm that Mary has shared with us, you know who to thank, Giovanni Aldini and Mary Shelley.
Indeed.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that very frightening show. Please watch again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.